Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to the latest episode of EOTT, Everything on the Table with me, Jimmy James. And it's my absolute pleasure to share with you today my conversation with the one and only Peter F Hamilton. Peter, how are you, brother?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah. Yourself?
Awesome. I'm not too bad, not too bad. Given the current circumstances, how are you finding, I suppose, your life? I know you spend most of your time writing anyway, so all this lockdown, I suppose, is not too different. But how are you finding the current situation? Are you kind of getting on all right? I know you're a family man and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I've got the kids home all the time. But like you say, I mean, this is what I do anyway, just sit in a room by myself.
Yeah, I think I think that's kind of the way for a lot of us. So it hasn't been too much of a stressful situation, but it's good to know everything's going on. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with Peter's work. He is the UK's #1 sci-fi author. But for those of you who aren't, I think is it from about 1996, if I'm not mistaken, Peter. That's kind of when you kicked off, and
93 was my
93. Forgive me. There we go. So you've been in the game for quite a while now. From the Greg Mandel series, I think you started off with your short stories and then built up to it. I've read pretty much everything, I'm pretty sure, apart from the new stuff, which I said Peter has just released a new trilogy, Salvation, which is what we will be focusing on for the conversation today. And I'm sure many of you will be like myself. I'm not one who likes to wait for the next episode, whether it's a TV series or a book. So I'm kind of been reading the first edition in kind of bite-sized portions, waiting for the second so I can stretch it out and then consume all three at once. But the Night's Dawn trilogy, the Commonwealth saga, which absolutely phenomenal from my own personal experience. The Great North Road was another one of my favorites, Peter, as I'm sure many people tell you. What I wanted to ask you, Peter, when I was reading, amongst other things, was Outliers. I forget, Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about to become a master at anything, whether it's golf or art or writing or anything, 10,000 hours of purposeful practice. Now, I know from some of your other stuff that I've listened to, when you were looking after your dear mother, you kind of realized, right, here we go, this is an opportunity now for me to do or don't, and you kind of bit the bullet and got right on with it. Now, what I wanted to ask was, where you kind of progressed and grew and developed, with that 10,000 hours, kind of give or take, did that kind of coincide with becoming the kind of the top tier level proficient kind of author that you are?
I'd say, yeah, I'm not sure how long 10,000 hours works out in days.
I know, it is quite a lot. I suppose an 8-hour day, I think I can do the maths. But it's going to be probably about 4 or 5 years, I would imagine.
That seems about right. I mean, I started writing short stories in, I think it was about 87. Mindstar got published in 93, as we've said, and then Night's Dawn came out in 96, but I was writing it a lot earlier than that, obviously. So yeah, it was, I mean, the Mandel books are good, but I kind of hit my stride with Night's Dawn. So yeah, it was a long apprenticeship.
For sure, yeah. And actually, when I went to, as you know, and many of my listeners already know, I spent time in prison for drug offences, and that was when I had the opportunity to read all the books, and they were on the shelf. And when you first start in the library, you're only allowed to take 2 books. They don't come back, this, that, and the other, and you have to build up your allocation. So I'm like, well, I need the biggest books, because you're only there once a week, and if you miss that weekly slot, a week without books, as you can imagine, it's. So yeah, I was like, where are these biggest books? And I could just see this big row of chunky books. And I just had a look, and I started at the beginning. So there was the progression, and I kind of grew along with you with the growth. It was really, really good. What I have found personally, though, is that I've not read a great deal of other, shall we say, space opera. I've read a bit of sci-fi, this, that, and the other. But you are kind of my only major foray, shall we say, then, as in invest in the time and the hours. But there are others out there, and I know you said about your inspirations being like E.E. Doc Smith, Heinlein, and Asimov, and others.
Back in the day, I just caution people that they are of their time.
I should yes, thank you, Peter. It's funny you should say, because my dear brother Colin, he's familiar with your work, and forgive me, I forget, there's someone they call the Chinese Peter F Hamilton. I'm sure he would rather me refer to him by his own name, but I will drop that in there. And he was also saying the same thing. He said, I've got a Heinlein biography, said, but it's a little bit dated now, spaceships with pedals and whatnot. But, as we've grown and progressed. Now, I know you say, Peter, it takes 6 months of note making to build up a world.
Roughly,
Roughly, give or take. Now, what I wanted to ask is, when you're doing that, because it's so in depth and detailed. What is your process? Do you have any consultants as such, or are you just research on the ground level, research papers, science documents? What's your kind of methodology, and where do you get your
I don't have
information?
anyone to turn to much. It is basically, if there's going to be a certain thing, if there's going to be a lot of biotechnology in this, whatever universe I'm building, I'll try and, well, I'll say keep up to date. I mean, there's just so much being published anyway, so many research. I'll just try and stay, I keep it at a pop science level. When you don't learn physics from my books, put it that way. But the grounding is there. I mean, the basics are right. Then of course, obviously extrapolate. Actually, the one exception to that is this year, there was a whole group of us went to the fusion place at Culham. We all had a look around there, a bunch of science fiction writers, and the reaction engines is also in the same science park. So we looked at that as well. But yeah,
Awesome.
Normally it's just research online, which is a little bit more boring.
Oh, no, it's good to know, actually, because I wasn't quite sure, because as I said, some of the stuff in there is very visionary to my mind. But as I said, it's kind of all out there, isn't it? And some of the stuff you can find on the patent sites as well is kind of mind-boggling.
Oh, yeah.
That brings me on nicely, actually. So we've had the kind of the wormhole technology universe, faster than light starship technology. And in this universe now, we've got into portal technology. Would you care to explain how, I'm sorry, just before, I imagine there were quite a few people who were probably incensed that you weren't doing any more books in the Commonwealth, but you decided to, rather than kind of, I think, is it fair to say, fall back on a relied success, you know, bite the bullet and test your skills and your limits and go down a different kind of path and keep it fresh? Is that fair to say?
Okay, yeah, two things on this. One, I've written, I think it's 7 books, I think, or is it 8 if you count Misspent Youth. That's enough for now. I've not said I'm never going back to it.
Indeed, indeed.
And don't take that as it's what's coming out next.
Yes, indeed. Keep us guessing. Keep us guessing.
Yeah, but yeah, I have to do something fresh every now and then. I can't just keep writing the same characters in the same universe. When I come up with a plot or an idea that'll fit in the Commonwealth, then I'll go back and write in the Commonwealth.
Beautiful.
But yeah, you've got 7 books to be getting on with. I think that's enough.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So sorry, brother. Would it be? Thank you for filling us in on that one. Would you be kind enough to kind of let us know what kind of led you into going down the portal model and kind of how that developed for you?
Yeah, I needed a different. Obviously, when you're doing a different universe, you've got to be careful about too much bleeding over from one into the other. So I wanted a different type of space travel available to them, and this was the way to do it. It kind of keeps, you can't actually have a faster than light starship, but you use a starship traveling at 0.9 light speed to take one end of your portal to another star system, then you can jump between them instantaneously. So it's a sort of halfway house between actual reality and the FTL of real science fiction.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, as I said, I'm kind of a third of the way through the first book, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it already. I've listened to a few of your other interviews, and the other gentleman who I was listening to was talking about the different style that you took with this one with regards to character development, referring to Dan Simmons' Hyperion series, which have been recommended to me. I did start reading one of them, and I haven't got into it, but as you said, there's certain styles that are kind of go back a long way. And I think that comes from the Canterbury Tales, I believe you said, and probably others as well.
I've been wanting, like I said, I want to write something different, not just in universes, but also a slightly different narrative structure, if you like. And I've always liked this one. And it's been at the back of my mind for many years to write it. And I always knew, he's writing like Simmons wrote Hyperion. But first off, Simmons nicked it from Canterbury Tales. And at this point in my career, no, I'm not ripping off Simmons. I'm writing in that whole kind of style. Yes, it's the same structure, but that's the only connection to it. So I'm no longer bothered about that.
Yes, it was wonderful. Thank you, Peter. As I say, it's kind of, because you're so established, it's like you can take a different kind of tack, and I was kind of thinking of it as in, building a wooden house. Anyone can build a house out of wood kind of thing, but your own skills and expertise and style
Yeah.
brings to that model, you know. So it's
Each house would be different. It's made out of the same stuff, but each house is different. Yeah.
Indeed. So with regards to, I only found out the other day, and you'll have to forgive me, I didn't put two and two together, that Sunny's Edge was one of your short stories. I think because I read it so long ago, and it was only when I was doing some research leading up that I saw it was the Netflix. And obviously that's an animated version. Now, they've made a few, or converted a few universes. Have you had any propositions or any visions for realizing any of these universes onto the big screen, or even now with kind of the advances in animation, 360 green screen and all this kind of stuff? Is that anything that's on the cards, or?
There are, and this is a perennial question, there are several of my books under option. The thing with this is it's a huge difference between being under option and in production.
Yeah.
Basically what option means is the producers will maybe come up with a script and a proposal for the big studios, walk it around. They have about, I think a standard contract is for 18 months or so. They've got 18 months to try and get it backed by a studio. So yes, there's always something in under option, and today is no different, but nothing is actually in production yet.
Oh, that'll be the day. That'll be a good day, I can say, because I've got something called aphantasia, which is a very limited ability to mentally visualize, we say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I wasn't really aware of it as such. It's, yeah, so when I'm reading these books, for example, if you see a film first, then you've got those visuals to, as you know, and then you can kind of use on that. But when you make your own, or when I make my own, I should say, yeah, it's kind of, I'm not always in tune with what the kind of vision is when I kind of watch them later on the production. So it would be interesting to see how that pans out. But an interesting point that you raised as well was the second reading. When I've read the Mandel series twice, I think it was the Night's Dawn trilogy. I read a few of them twice, and when you know, I think at one point I'd actually forgotten, so it was almost like a completely new read, which was great. There was little bits I was like, oh yeah, I know what's going on here. But it's really, really interesting to see. The second read was almost better than the first one in certain ways, by kind of following the plot and then because of misremembering and kind of all that kind of stuff. So that was really good. There was a gentleman I wanted to give a shout out, actually. He's got a brain injury. Mr. Archie was his YouTube moniker. And because of his brain injury, he has a short-term memory issue. So he's on his fifth foray through the whole series. We've got them all on his shelf, and he's on the fifth foray because every time it's absolutely new to him, which is phenomenal. So he doesn't need to buy any new books, which I just thought was absolutely fantastic. So
a lot of people have said they pick things up on the second reading that they didn't notice in the first. It'd be interesting for me to go back and read Night's Dawn, because I mean, when did I finish it? No, about 2000, and I basically haven't seen it since. So I'd be interested to see how much I could remember, because I keep getting asked questions at conventions and book signings and things, and there's a lot of stuff I have to struggle to get there now.
I can imagine it's quite a wealth of material, to be fair. And there were just little snippets that always stick with me, like the visualization of the submolecular nanotechnology and the description of kind of how that works from kind of activating, and it was very strange actually. And I've had some subsequent kind of psychedelic experiences which fed into it. And I don't know whether that was the material from the book feeding into the experiences or not. I'm not too sure. It was very clear from all the books that there's kind of an understanding of how the world works, our current planet, the models, society, and how that would potentially feed out into the universe, which I thought was kind of a really nice part that I enjoyed of it. What I was interested in now is do you have kind of dynasty, shall we say, corporate interest, this kind of thing, established old money, etc., but then also kind of new ideologies and religions and factions that kind of split off sometimes into just parts of a world or even their own worlds altogether. Now, in the current climate, Peter, I kind of see that we're at a bit of a crossroads with regards to the kind of transhumanism agenda and the hyperhumanism, as my friend Carl H. Smith talks about, where we retain what he refers to as our analog sovereignty. So, yeah, whilst I personally, I'm no Luddite, I love technology, I want to try it all, but also I would like to be able to retain this organic body, then, for example, to be able to go into a flotation tank, a sensory deprivation tank inside a Faraday cage and go inside my own kind of birthed body, shall we say. Do you have any particular kind of techniques that you use yourself for inspiration or kind of creativity? Some people use the flotation tanks to get into that kind of theta state for ideas. What's your kind of methodology for generating inspiration?
It's a combination of fusing two ideas together and extrapolating. It's just what I do. You know, it's a lot. I say it takes 6 months to come up with the notes and the structure. A lot of that is, it's not all just sitting there typing furiously. It's a lot of that is just basically working out in my mind how things, you know, if you have, the obvious one is if you have clean fusion power, how that's going to affect the economy, which will knock onto the politics, which will knock onto all sorts of things. It is this constant domino, a row of dominoes falling, if you like, to try and predict how these things might happen. The point being that these are not predictions, these are what ifs. So what if you had fusion power and nanotechnology? You know, it's this constant combination of things. My interest lies in not so much the shiny gadget as how the shiny gadget is going to affect society. That's the fascination for me.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, and that's kind of is evident in your writings. Excuse me. With regards to going back to my original point about retaining the analog sovereignty, do you foresee, and I know you say as a writer, it's your ability, sort of get out of jail free card, I don't think is the right expression for it, but you're able to kind of reserve comments or say on real life issues because, you know, it's your kind of gift as a writer. But with regards to different factions and being able to go down different paths, shall we say, and retain different societies. Do you think that's something that we will be able to do on this planet as human beings ourselves? Or do you think that we'll just be taken along a certain agenda? So for example, I'll make that a bit clearer if I may. So for example, with regards to, shall we say, mandatory vaccines, if you're able to mandate as a society a vaccine, then arguably later on you might be able to mandate certain technologies, maybe on the health kind of perspective of things. But I wonder, do you think we have any opportunity or any kind of scope on this planet to be able to retain our different kind of tribal and ideological factions, or do you think we will eventually become some kind of conglomerate of
the monoculture?
Monoculture, thank you, yeah, monoculture.
I don't think we're ever going to reach monoculture.
No?
I think I certainly said it in Salvation, I forget which book. This is, in Salvation, it's sort of the dawn of setting up a whole new batch of societies. And you get a lot of separation. And then, of course, it always starts, inevitably, it starts off with the greatest intentions ever. But the thing about ideology-based societies is that the next generation comes along and not all of them want to live in it. So how, in that case, how authoritarian do you become? Do you force the next generation to live in it? With the democracies that we've got at the moment, there's enough slack in the system so that people can branch out, and there's a huge diversity of political thought at the moment. And it's all kind of works together because we're relatively tolerant. But if you get these very devout is the right word, probably, devout intent societies built around a single tenet that everyone will live by, that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yes, I agree, and I kind of hope that we will be able to. I very much like I forget which one specifically it was, which book, but it was the pastoral culture, you know, where they've gone way ahead of us as we are now, and then decided actually we want to keep things a bit simple and took it right back the other way. So that was great. What I've been wondering lately, Peter, is I've been looking at things like Google's ability for mastering quantum supremacy, these kind of things, and then that in coordination with certain people talking on things like Joe Rogan about artificial intelligence, virtual reality, where it's gone. Do you watch Black Mirrors at all? Have you seen any of the Black Mirror episodes?
Some of them, yes. I'm way behind on all my streaming though.
Oh, I imagine, yeah. But it's things like the USS Callister, which is a fantastic episode, and a couple of others where they have the VR, you know, a little doop, put it on the side of your head, and
that episode, yeah.
Indeed, and the next thing you know, you're in a virtual reality simulation that is indistinguishable from waking reality. On that basis, it made me wonder if perhaps these universes could be realized within a virtual reality world using these quantum computers to recreate these kind of like Second Life. You know, Second Life is a massive thing where so many people live within these virtual worlds, and I think there's a potential possibility that rather than actually literally going out into the stars, that people will just go inwards and into these virtual reality worlds, which will be indistinguishable, as I say, from waking reality, and completely kind of immersive. I personally found the books were uber immersive for myself. You know, I'm in a prison cell, very much restricted stimulation, shall we say, and they just took me away, Peter. So I wanted to thank you for that personally, because it was a gift to me, and I really appreciate it. But can I ask, do you have any thoughts on what I just raised there with regards to the potential for these virtual reality worlds to be realized within kind of quantum computers and stuff?
Yeah, especially if they're as good as you're indicating, which it's, you know, you have the complete sensorium and it's indistinguishable from real life. Why would you come out?
Indeed.
You'd be ruler of your own universe. Everything would be perfect for you. Why would you ever leave? And there's been, I mean, it's basically the Matrix. We've had enough, quite a lot of science fiction stories about that. What's the point of leaving something like that? Which I think would be an issue. I mean, you get people playing online games for days at a time. You know, don't move from the desk. They've got the bottle to wee in. They've got their power snacks and everything. It's just an extension of that.
Yes, indeed, and it's something that I can really see. You talked about your work being kind of more what-if questions rather than predictive programming, but I've been doing, I'm sure you'll be familiar with the concept, whether you agree with it or not, or think that it's a kind of a thing, but predictive programming, which is an interesting concept. And I must admit, I kind of, I was sectioned in 2017. I had a little bit of a kind of shift in experience, and I think it's fair to say I kind of became a bit delusional afterwards. But one part of it, which you'll probably find quite amusing, when I was looking to set up a flotation business, flotation, sensory deprivation, healing modalities, brain entrainment like technology, and this kind of stuff. And as a part of setting that up, I put a lot of time into it and built up the business plan and whatnot. And I met a business connector, a gentleman who meets with a consortium of investors, so say worth $1 trillion between them. They've made all their money, you know, they're not interested in making money. They're looking for humanitarian kind of ventures, this kind of stuff. And
Right.
Alongside that, this is just trying to explain the narrative. Alongside that, he himself is part of a space company in the UK. And his aspirations, as he shared with me, were to be a knight of the round table and one of the first trillionaires from mining asteroids, which is obviously quite visionary, you know, and he's a visionary fella. But that all fed into, when I was sectioned, I was telling my family that I was going to give my partner's daughter our own planet in the future, because my success, I have delusions of grandeur, I'm sure, but it was, and it didn't make sense to any of them because they hadn't read your books. But for someone like yourself, I suppose you can understand, if you become a billionaire or a trillionaire, the prospect of owning a planet later on in life isn't such an outlandish prospect. But nevertheless, I get away from that. So where are we? I've got a few notes here, Peter. Now,
I'll take you up on something about this.
Please do.
Because there was an asteroid, was it last year, that was supposedly got a lot of gold in it. It would make everyone a billionaire.
Right, okay.
No, it wouldn't. Gold's value is based on its rarity.
Indeed.
And all this, I mean, I love the idea of mining the asteroids and, you know, getting the mining off Earth, because it's a very dirty industry and we'll save the environment and everything. Nobody seems to have given any thought, if you need 20 million tons of steel a year, the idea was, and I've used it in books, I've used it in the Night's Dawn trilogy, is that you turn it into foam steel lifting bodies and then just aerobrake it into Earth, and it splashes down the ocean. Has anyone actually done the maths of aerobraking, 100 million tons of steel a year through our atmosphere at 1,000 degrees each time? It's an environmental disaster. So yeah, much as I love the idea of mining the asteroids to replace all the strip mines on Earth, I just can't believe it's ever going to work.
Yeah, I have my own. Thank you, Peter. I have my own reservations, which I shared with him, which he wasn't impressed with. But yeah, I don't quite know where we're going, to be honest with you. This whole prospect of breakaway civilizations that are potentially already, out there exploring the stars is a fascinating concept to me. But
that is, if we get a wealth from space, if you like, it's like the unified wealth we have today. You and I have at our fingertips things that kings 200 years ago didn't have.
Yeah.
Health service, internet, books, running water, cooked meals, all this is a collective wealth that didn't exist. I mean, yes, we've got a huge disparity in wealth, and whether we'll ever quite get to post-scarcity is another thing. But the overall level is constantly rising. I think that's where the wealth from space will come, rather than more Musks and Bezoses. It will disperse among us slowly, probably, and yes, there will always be discrepancies. But I can't see, if we go into space, all that's going to happen is we'll have another 2,000 trillionaires. It will come down amongst us, and the wealth of it will be this ability to live in different ways and different styles, rather than fancier gadgets and ever bigger houses and crap like that.
Beautiful, thank you, brother. I really like that kind of sentiment. I'm currently narrating the Anastasia Ringing Cedar series of books by Vladimir Migre, and the premise there is, are you familiar with the series?
No, I'm not.
It's a fantastic one. It might not be your cup of tea, but I would recommend checking out just to give it a go, and it might be something for the family as well. And it's basically, I'm going to really butcher this, forgive me, but Anastasia lives in what they call a kin domain in Russia, right up in Siberia. They've been here for thousands of years, and this is how families live. They have their own kin domains, and technology is beneath them. And the thing is, technology is, any technology that we have is almost mimicking a human ability. Things like mobile phones. I'm about a year now with a mobile phone. But telepathy, to my understanding, if we live in a holographic simulated universe, telepathy is then completely explainable, and all these other kind of superhuman abilities, which I think are just things that we are capable of doing as humans, which have been suppressed or lost and need to be rediscovered. And this is again where I come back to that kind of split and being able to retain the analog sovereignty to rediscover those kind of those gifts. And if that wealth does feed back down to the collective, that'll be a beautiful day. Thank you, brother. I really like that. I wanted to mention you chatted with the other fella, and he was talking about, you were name checking a couple of people. He was a geek. I think he will be happy enough to admit that. I'm not so much Nerdsville Central myself in that respect of being able to know all these people, but it was interesting. He said to you, did you do that on the kind of basis of they will be recognized into the far future, and you hadn't actually thought of it that way? But I have myself. I'm thinking, are these guys the kind of Orwells and Huxleys of our day, kind of predicting where we're going to be going near into the future? But you kind of already answered the question for me, which is nice. That it is just a kind of, well, what if? Excuse me. Do you think that with regards to the current situation now, someone was asking, would you consider doing kind of a masterclass, like an online masterclass? Is that something you ever considered, or?
I'd be a hopeless teacher. I really would.
Oh, we have our fortes, right?
Yeah. The thing is, I'm self-taught. I didn't do the creative writing course or anything like that, and I have very little patience. as my children will testify. So
I think you're doing enough for the world, if I may interject. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think you're doing enough with the books. But yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think anyone would learn anything from me, basically. Because to me, what I do is obvious. You know, when I was younger, I was never going to be a sprinter or a footballer or anything like that. And that's an inbuilt talent, if you like. And this is my one talent is writing like this. You can always develop your writing skills, but you have to have them to start with, and that's not something that can be learned. It's instinctual.
Indeed. Thank you, brother. Very honest, and yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I wanted to comment on, oh, forgive me, Morning Light Mountain. Is that the character's name?
Yes.
Yes, Morning Light Mountain. Now that for me was, I'd never experienced anything like that. Your descriptive evolution of that species, and I won't kind of give any spoilers really, but a bit of deja vu there. But yeah, Morning Light Mountain. It was quite a thing to kind of read the development of how, you know, your vision of how did that come about? Did you just kind of sit and ponder it and it came to you, your vision, or was it a polisher that you kind of had to work on over time?
Yeah. This is Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained, which is the sort of Commonwealth stuff. It was the classic alien invasion story, and you have to have a reason for it. My favourite phrase for this is, you know, we're not in the 50s anymore. We know aliens aren't going to invade for our gold and our women.
Yeah.
You've got to give it a viable reason. And so I came up with Morning Light Mountain, which to us, invading another biological biosphere and taking it over is insane. It's ludicrous. But to it, from its evolutionary and societal point of view, it's obvious it's what you do, because everything else is just a disease almost. Other life is irrelevant, and is there to be exterminated and replaced by itself. And that's the attitude it has. And the reason it has that attitude is its evolution, which so is almost working backwards from that. Helped me develop Morning Light Mountain. And this is what I love about science fiction is you have to put yourself in the other's point of view. Same with when you're dealing with power structures within human societies, is people never see themselves as the bad guy. Yeah. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh, you know, those guys are all Nazis, therefore they are bad. But whatever it is they're doing, they have a reason for it. And to them, it makes sense. And you have to make it logical and make it real to them, else you are just writing cardboard Nazis.
Beautiful. Yes, thank you for that. I thoroughly enjoyed those. I highly recommend those two books. It was really, really enjoyable. Something else you mentioned was that Aussie. I'm sorry to stay in the Commonwealth a minute. What I would like to say, Peter, if it's okay with yourself, is when the third book comes out, if we can revisit and properly get into the salvation sequence. But while I have you, if I may, you said a lot of people say Aussie is the favourite character of many of the fans and the readers. Yeah. Aussie Isaacs. And I was thinking about it, and he is one that very much sticks in my mind, as well as Paul Mayo. But for Aussie Isaacs, I think the reason why is because, in my experience and from my research, the majority, if not all, of the human beings on this planet who are at that level have got there through nefarious, or at least later on in their journeys, nefarious endeavours, shall we say. Whereas Aussie was just his genius, and his business partner did all the shall we say, the work, and he just enjoyed the fruits of the labour. And it's brilliant, fantastic. He's just a beautiful soul. And the different concepts of rejuvenation, life extension. But what I loved was it was just a little aside, I forget which book, forgive me, but it was just a little aside that he'd lived a couple of lives as different animals with the consciousness. Have you read Benny Shannon, Antipodes of the Mind?
No.
Fantastic book. Well, I read that during the same time period. He is an Israeli scholar who was psychology was his kind of forte, but he went off into the jungle, did a lot of ayahuasca, and documented his experiences from a psychological perspective. Fascinating book, really, really highly recommend it. But it was at the same time I was reading that, and he was talking about having experiences as a human being that entered the consciousness of animals, being preyed upon, these kind of things. So it was a wonderful synchronicity, I think, at the time. So yeah.
Now this is the problem I was on about at the start. I don't actually remember doing that with Aussie.
It's literally a throwaway comment.
Right.
I
Okay.
think it's in. Oh, forgive me. I think it's. Is it Beyond Stars? I'll have to have a look. But he's more of a being mentioned. He's not actually
Right.
part of it. So then
No, he wasn't in the last two books, was he?
I think it's more of a mention. So as you say, yeah, such a wealth of material. It's easy to let things slip. But yeah, that was my kind of take on it. That he's at that level of unbridled ability to do anything, but yet retains, it seems to be, a good heart, a good soul, and that's very much illustrated through his journey with the young fella on the disappearing roads. And forgive me,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not doing that storyline justice, but you know exactly what I'm referring to, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got that was from that kind of narrative of the pathways that appear and disappear, kind of within worlds, was resonating with the old Celtic mythologies, where people would sometimes find themselves in time loops and lost down different paths. So it was just, again, another kind of nice synchronicity. So yes, very, very enjoyable stuff. Is it? Are we still looking at October for part 3, Peter?
As far as I know, yeah.
Wonderful.
There's a lot of, this is basically publishing business, where there's a lot of books that were coming out in summer are now not going to be.
Right.
So I think we're going to get a lot of books come out in October, well, autumn in general. As far as I know, it's still on schedule for the given date. But
Beautiful.
you know, who knows what's going to happen?
Well, this is it. This is it. It's all a bit up in the air at the moment, but fingers crossed, all will be well, and part 3 will be along shortly. And
yeah, as I say, it's been written and it's been edited, so yeah, it's there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm looking forward to reading all 3 and making some notes. And if it's all right with yourself, Peter, I'd love to revisit and we can kind of.
Happy to, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I'm going to let you go, brother. I know you're a busy man, and thank you very much for your time today. Was there anything you wanted to round off to? I know you're kind of you're a one project man, so you've been very focused on this. Are you going to take a little break now and then maybe kick back for a while?
There's a lot of notes coming together for whatever's next.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm actually out of contract at the moment, so that's
okay.
That gives your mind some freedom for once.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I've got projects in mind, but I don't know what I'm going to be doing next, actually.
Oh, fantastic! Well, I suppose that's where the magic happens, right? When there's nothing in the free space. Well, Peter, bless you, brother. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for connecting, and
nice to see you.
Enjoy yourselves. Lovely to see you, sir. And we'll catch up very soon. All the best.
Cheers.
Thank you, brother.
Bye.